Hello guys, welcome back. In this video we are going to implement calls, and also we are going to create the abilities for chef users to delete or update their food recipes. So call stands for cross origin resource sharing. Is basically a way for us to restrict access to our web server. So with calls we can define rules on how other applications can interact with our API. So there are a lot of ways to implement calls in our web app or in our Django app, but one of the easiest ways is with a package called the Django calls header. So this package is very easy to implement. Django calls header. There are other ways you can do it, but this is one of the easiest ways. So we're going to just install this package now, and I'll walk you through the implementations. We need to install it, add it to our installed app, and also grab this middleware that comes with the Django calls header. So let's head over to our app now and just install the app. So just grab this line of code. So we can add it in here. So after done that, we need to bring in this middleware before the comma. So that's a basic setup. So what we need to do now is the configuration on how other applications can access our API. The calls allowed underscore origin. These are the configurations that we can set in the Django settings to restrict. So the calls allowed origin, a list of origin that are authorized to make cross-site HTTP requests. Alright, so this is where we provide look at the example. Also be called, it previously was called whitelist. Alright, so it talks about the different servers that have access to our API. So once we define this, it's only the website or the web server that we define in here that will have access to our API. But if we want any kind of web server or website to have access to our API, we'll just define the cross allowed or origin, and we'll set this to true. So, but in the real world application where you want your API to be a private API, maybe you want to be accessible to only some specific website or other specific web server, you specify it with cross allowed origin. So anywhere within our setting file, we can just put set the cross allowed or set it to true. Alright, so that's all about our course. So what we're going to do next is create the abilities for chef users to be able to update and delete their recipes. Alright, so for that we're going to be writing our own another custom permission, because the chef permission class that we created before was like for the view level. Alright, it's like a general permission for the view level. All users are chefs. So when it comes to deleting and updating, we need to write a permission class for object level, because we only want users that created that particular food recipe should be able to edit or delete it. So we just head back to our permission.py file, and here we're going to create another permission class, and we'll call this, let's call this owner, and this is going to extend also the permission base permission class. And here we're going to define the house object permission method. Alright, so this is the method to actually interact with object level permission. You can see it has the request, view, and the object, which is the object that we are actually interacting with, the model object. So in this case, we want the user that has this permission to be able to edit objects that they are the owner of. So for that, if you check our model.py file, it has a field called chef, which is a foreign key to the chef book. Alright, so we want the legitimate chef to be able to edit his own food recipe. So in here we need to get the from authentication We need to get the chef book model, so we import it. Heading over to this permission class. In here, first of all, we need to get the chef object. Right, so we are getting the chef objects for the chef book, where the chef parameter from the chef book is equal to the logged in user. That's the user that is logged in, or the user that is performing this operation. So once we get the chef object, we want to return true. We want to return true if the object dot chef. Alright, so when I mean object dot chef, I'm talking about the chef feed in this object, that's the food object. So we want to check if the return true if the object dot chef is equivalent to the chef instance. Alright, so this will return true if that is actually correct. That's if the object dot chef is equivalent to the chef instance that we get from the logged in user. Alright, these are our permissions, so we can save this and then head over to our view. So in here we're going to define our class, and we'll call this food update and delete API view. And then if we check our generic views, under generic views, I think we have some pair views that we can use. Okay, we have the retrieve update, we have the retrieve delete, and we also have the retrieve update and destroy API view. I think we can use this very one, this retrieve update and delete, but the action we want is the update and delete. For you to actually be able to update or delete, you need to actually get the previous data, so we need to retrieve also. So this is a good fit for such operations, so we actually need to import this also from generic. So the retrieve update delete API view. Alright, and we are extending it. Here we need to specify our serializer class, query set to determine the object that should be returned, then permission class. This is obviously going to be a list of permissions, so we need is authenticated, we need the is chef, and also we need the is owner, so we need to import that. Alright, passing the is owner also. So these are the three permission class that is needed to perform this action. And here we need to provide the lookup feed, because it's going to be a detail page, so the lookup feed should be primary key. I think that, and that's all for our view. So you see how easy it is to implement such views with the generic API view. We're able to combine just three endpoints, retrieve and update and delete, into just 5 lines of code. So we need to set up our URL for this. So in our URL.py file, just look for somewhere, let's please call it edit food, passing the primary key as lookup feed. Alright, so we can save this. And secondly, remember that this the serializer, that is the food serializer, has a nested serializer, which is the recipe serializer, which is the food recipe, and the food serializer. So there's a nested serializer here, and remember we override the create method. We also need to override the update method for this to work, because the default update method only knows how to work with a single model, but in this case we are trying to update double model, that is 2 separate model at the same time, just the way we created the 2 separate models at the same time, which is the food model and the food recipe model. So for that we override the create method. So just bear with me, this is a longer method. So first of all, we just define the update method, and in this case, just the way we popped out the recipe data, we do the same also. So what we are doing here, we are getting the incoming data, which is the data that is coming from the request for the recipe. So we are bringing it out of the general, that's the full validated data. So we are separating the recipe data, And also we need to also separate the recipe instance, that's the previous recipe instance object. So we can just store that in a variable. Let me call it previous recipes, and this is actually going to be coming from the instance dot recipe. Is an object on its own. So what we're going to do is wrap this around a parenthesis and get the dot or. Alright, so like this we access the previous recipe instance object, and once we need to convert it to a list. So we're going to say previous recipe equals a list recipe. Alright, so we'll be able to get the incoming recipe data and the previous recipe data out of the full data. So once we have this, we can then get the instance dot name. I want to get the name. Then if the name is not available, we want to replace it with the instance dot name. Alright, so I'm going to just copy this and paste over. You can see we have the instance dot category, getting the category data. If it's not available, replace it with the previous data. So for the other fields also. So once we do that, we can save the full instance. So this will actually save the full instance. So once the full instance is saved, we also need to perform need to work with the recipe data now. So same, we also need to loop through the recipe data. So by getting the recipe for recipe in recipe data. Alright, so this will store our incoming recipe data here. And also remember, the previous data is a list, and inside this list we have a single object instance which is in the form of a dictionary. So we need to get that. Now we can call that let me call it recipe object. I want to set that into I want to pop with the object with the 0 index element. Remember, we just have only one in the list. We only have one object in this list, so we are popping out that one object and we are storing it in the recipe object. Alright, so in this case we can simply say, follow along, we can say recipe plus recipe object dot procedures recipe data dot get, where we have the procedures, and if that is not available, we also want to pass so if that is not available, we want to pass the recipe object of procedures. Alright, so just like that. So we're going to grab this and paste it one more time. Cooking duration set equals to the incoming recipe dot get cooking duration, and if that is not available, we replace it with the previous data of recipe object of cooking duration. Alright, so in that case, after updating the food object, we are also updating the recipe object. Alright, so having done this, we save the recipe object. So recipe object to save. So once we save this, we can simply return the instance. As for the update method, so let's go through it one more time for us to get a proper understanding. So first of all, we are popping out the recipe data from the incoming request, and also we are getting the recipe object from the instance, that's the previous data of the recipe object. So once we get that, we convert it to a list. Then we perform our normal update operation on the food model by saying instance.name is that instance.category, which are the fields in the food model. So once we perform the update, we save the food model, that which is the instance. Once we save that, then we loop over the incoming recipe data. Then we get the previous recipe object from the pre-recipe.pop. Remember, it's a list, so we are only getting the 0 index element, which is just the single instance object that is in the list. Once we get that, we can simply say recipe object of procedures, replace it with the recipe, that's the incoming recipe.get procedures. If that is not available, we replace it with the recipe underscore object dot procedure. Same thing for cooking duration. Once we do that, we save the recipe object. After saving recipe object, we return the instance. Alright, so this is the, let's take out this, we don't need this. So this is the update method for this. So we can save this now, and I think we are good to go. So we can test our endpoint. So let's check if our server is still running. Our server is running, so we can head over to our Swagger UI docs and just refresh. So once we refresh, we'll need to log in again. So let's perform. Let's get our recipe first. So once we execute this, we'll get all the recipes that we have. White soup, we have the black soup, and we have the test snacks. So let's update the test snacks recipe. So let's so we'll come to put, we try that, and we need to specify the ID, and the ID is 5. So if we check again, the ID is 5. Once we get the IDs, we can change the feeds. Use test snacks. We want to change from test snacks to cake, and the category is category 2. So we are changing it to cake. So let's check the previous data one more time. We are updating the food recipe with the ID of 5, and the previous name is test snacks, and you can see the previous data. Origin was Asia, nutritional value was vitamin. So we are updating majority of the feed. So let's perform an audit, our update operation. So once we have this feed set up, so we can execute. So let's see our response. We can see our response. We see the name change to cake. We can see the description changes, which is test snacks description, and the nutritional value is now carbohydrates. So the previous data is still here. So if we re-execute this food recipe endpoint again, we see that our food recipe with the ID of 5 has changed to cake. Alright, so we can update, and then let's create more dummy food recipes so that we can delete. So that 2 object was created. So let's try and delete one. So to delete, we go to the endpoint, the delete endpoint. I think you can see how useful this Swagger UI documentation is. So let's go to the delete endpoint, and let's provide the ID. To try that, we need to provide the ID of the element we want to delete, and we want to delete the ID of the 7th ID. So if we hit the execute and message, because the delete operation. So let's try and do the get all recipes again. So if we execute the get all recipe, let's check if the 7th one was deleted. Alright, it was actually deleted. Okay, so it's working fine. So our delete operation is working fine, and our update operation is working fine. So thank you guys for watching. I will end this video here. Actually, this is actually the end of this REST API series, and in the course of this REST API series, we've been able to learn a lot, and there are still a lot of things for us to learn actually, but this is for beginners and to about intermediate level. And then we've learned about how to work with serializer, how to work with necessary serializers, authentications, permission, and so many others. So please guys, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Up next, we'll start working on building a GraphQL API and also working with GraphQL API and React. See you guys next time.